friends, colleagues, and listeners, we are witnessing a moment that will define the next chapter of global politics. The sight of Russian warships cutting through Caribbean waters is not just military theater. It is a declaration that the world order as we know it is cracking at its foundation. Picture this: sleek Russian destroyers, their radar arrays spinning against the tropical sky, while fighter jets streak overhead. This is not a coincidence. This is calculated intimidation on a scale we have not seen in decades. The question burning in every diplomatic corridor is simple yet terrifying. What happens when two nuclear superpowers decide the same backyard is not big enough for both of them? For over a century, the United States has treated Latin America as its strategic domain. Venezuela, sitting on the world's largest proven oil reserves, has always been the crown jewel in this game of regional dominance. But what makes this moment so dangerously different is that for the first time in generations, America is not playing chess alone. Washington's approach to Venezuela reads like a masterclass in modern warfare without bullets. It begins with sanctions, presented to the world as a moral crusade, but strip away the rhetoric and you see the real strategy: economic strangulation designed to bring a nation to its knees. This is not about numbers on a spreadsheet. We are talking about hospitals without medicine, families choosing between food and survival, and over 7 million people forced to flee their homes, creating the largest refugee crisis in the Western Hemisphere than ever faced in the West when the 1883 Gulf. Behind closed doors, the strategy grows even more ruthless. Intelligence agencies funnel resources into opposition groups, not to strengthen democracy, but to manufacture the appearance of popular uprising. Social media campaigns spread disinformation, and propaganda networks amplify every grievance. The goal is simple: make the government appear so illegitimate that regime change seems inevitable. But Russia is not content to watch from the sidelines. Those warships sailing toward Venezuelan waters carry a message that echoes far beyond the Caribbean. The age of unchallenged American influence is over. Every Russian missile system deployed, every joint military exercise sends shockwaves through the Pentagon. Suddenly, a manageable regional problem has become a potential flashpoint for global conflict. Think about the psychology at play. For generations, American policymakers have operated under the assumption that the Western Hemisphere belongs to them. The Monroe Doctrine, updated for the modern era, declared that foreign powers have no business here. Russia's presence shatters that assumption completely. Now imagine you are in the Situation Room in Washington. Intelligence reports flood in about Russian submarines patrolling shipping lanes. Satellite images show advanced air defense systems being assembled near Caracas. Your military advisors ask uncomfortable questions. What if Venezuela is not as isolated as we thought? What if our threats are met with actual resistance from a nuclear-armed opponent? The stakes escalate by the hour. Both sides are now trapped in a logic of escalation that neither fully controls. Washington cannot back down without appearing weak to allies worldwide. Russia cannot withdraw without abandoning its credibility as a global power. And the Venezuelan government finds itself at the center of a geopolitical hurricane where every decision carries global implications. This is not just a dispute over Venezuelan politics. It is a fundamental test of whether the international system can accommodate multiple centers of power or whether we are destined for a new Cold War fought through proxy conflicts from Latin America to Eastern Europe. The economic dimensions add another layer of danger. Venezuela's oil reserves represent leverage over global energy markets. By positioning itself as Venezuela's primary partner, Moscow gains access to these resources while denying them to American influence. It is a strategic move that turns America's own playbook against itself. But the real genius of Russia's strategy lies in its timing. This deployment comes as American foreign policy is stretched thin across Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific, and the Middle East. Venezuela has become another front in an increasingly complex competition. American planners now face a nightmare scenario. How do you project power when your opponent can open new fronts faster than you can respond? The human dimension of this crisis cannot be ignored. Ordinary Venezuelans are caught between forces beyond their control. Families struggle with shortages while their government hosts foreign forces. Young people see their futures mortgaged to a geopolitical game. This is not abstract. These are real lives hanging in the balance. Yet there is also pride in Venezuela's resistance. The country has survived centuries of foreign intervention. For many, this struggle is part of a longer fight for genuine independence. The presence of Russian forces symbolizes that alternative futures are possible, that small nations need not accept the role of junior partners in someone else's empire. We stand at a crossroads that will define international relations for a generation. The choices made in the coming months will determine whether we slide toward confrontation or find a way to manage competition without catastrophic conflict. The old world order is ending. The question is what replaces it? A managed multipolar world or a chaotic descent into conflict between nuclear superpowers? Venezuela has become the testing ground. The outcome will send a signal to every nation about whether sovereignty can be defended and whether great powers can coexist. The stakes could not be higher. We are witnessing the birth pangs of a new international system, one that will shape human civilization for decades to come. This is not about choosing sides. It is about understanding that we live in a moment of historical transition where small decisions can have enormous consequences. The future of peace and prosperity hangs in the balance. The world has changed. The old rules no longer apply. Pay attention, demand accountability from your leaders, and prepare for a future that will be defined by how well we navigate this dangerous passage from one world order to the next. Because beneath the visible military posturing, an even more significant battle is being waged in the realms of economics, technology, and information. The United States has long wielded the global financial system as a weapon of unparalleled power. By cutting Venezuela off from dollar-denominated transactions and international banking networks, Washington intended to deliver a knockout blow, but this crisis is proving that strategy to be a double-edged sword. In response, Russia and other powers are helping Venezuela construct an alternative financial architecture. New payment systems, currency swaps, and trade agreements are being built that bypass American-controlled channels. Every successful transaction that avoids the dollar is a small crack in the foundation of American economic hegemony. If Venezuela can survive and even trade despite these sanctions, it becomes a blueprint for every other nation chafing under American financial pressure. The message is clear. There are alternatives. The monopoly is broken. This extends into the technological sphere. The Russian warships are not just carrying missiles, they are equipped with some of the most advanced electronic warfare and air defense systems in the world. Their deployment in the Caribbean is a live fire test in America's backyard. American commanders are now forced to operate knowing that their communications, their radar signatures, and their flight patterns are being studied, analyzed, and potentially countered. The knowledge gained here will be invaluable in future confrontations, shaping military doctrines for years to come. But the technological competition goes beyond the military. It encompasses everything from space-based surveillance and quantum computing research to biotechnology. Venezuela's rich biodiversity is a treasure trove for pharmaceutical development, and partnerships with Russian and Chinese research institutions are moving forward where American sanctions have blocked collaboration. The race for technological supremacy is being fought with every joint research grant and every technology transfer, with long-term consequences for economic and strategic advantage. The information war is equally intense. Our screens are flooded with competing narratives. One side speaks of humanitarian intervention and democracy, the other of anti-imperialism and sovereignty. Social media platforms have become battlegrounds where truth is the first casualty. This saturation of conflicting stories creates a fog of war that benefits all sides, allowing them to justify their actions to domestic audiences while obscuring their true strategic objectives from the world. And then there is the ultimate terrifying dimension, the nuclear shadow. For the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the specter of direct confrontation between two nuclear superpowers is looming so close to American shores. The doctrine of mutual assured destruction relies on rational actors with time to deliberate. But today, with advanced AI systems compressing decision-making timelines and the potential for technical glitches or miscalculations, the margin for error is vanishingly small. The officers on those ships and in those cockpits are operating under immense psychological pressure, where a single mistake could have consequences beyond comprehension. So where does this relentless escalation lead? It points to a world that is not just multipolar, but fragmented. We are moving toward a system of competing spheres of influence with different financial networks, separate internet infrastructures, and rival security alliances. The ideal of a global community governed by universal rules is fading, replaced by a reality of strategic blocks and digital iron curtains. Venezuela is the epicenter of this great unraveling. It is a preview of the 21st century conflict, a hybrid war fought with sanctions, cyber attacks, propaganda, and proxy forces, all while nuclear-armed giants circle each other. The outcome will not merely determine the fate of one nation, it will set the precedent for how power is contested in this new era. The critical, urgent question for every world leader is whether they can construct guardrails, new codes of conduct, channels of communication, and crisis management tools to prevent this competition from spiraling into a hot war. The alternative is a continuous state of volatile confrontation where every regional dispute from the South China Sea to Eastern Europe carries the risk of triggering a global chain reaction. We are all, whether we realize it or not, living in the shadow of those Russian warships. Their journey is a symbol of a world in transition, a warning of the dangers ahead, and a test of our collective ability to navigate a future where the old certainties have vanished. The choices made in the coming weeks will echo through history. The time for wisdom, for sober judgment, and for courageous diplomacy has never been more critical. This fragmentation extends beyond finance and technology into the very psyche of the global community. We are witnessing the erosion of a shared narrative, a common understanding of what constitutes reality in international affairs. The institutions built in the 20th century to mediate conflict and foster cooperation, the United Nations, the Organization of American States, are being revealed as architectures of a bygone age, struggling to maintain relevance when the fundamental premise of a U.S.-led order is no longer accepted by other major powers. This creates a vacuum, and into that vacuum rushes a dangerous unpredictability. In the past, even during the Cold War, there were established protocols, there were red lines, often clearly communicated through back channels. There was a mutual, albeit grudging, respect for spheres of influence. Today, those spheres are being actively contested. Russia's move into the Caribbean is a direct challenge to what was once an incontestable American sphere. The unspoken question is, how will China respond? Will it see this as a green light to further solidify its own sphere in the South China Sea, or perhaps to make a decisive move regarding Taiwan? This interconnectedness of crises is the new normal. A sanctions policy in Caracas can trigger a currency agreement between Moscow and Beijing. A joint naval exercise off the coast of Venezuela can influence the calculations of diplomats in Brussels regarding Ukraine. There are no more isolated events. The global system is a web, and plucking one strand in Venezuela sends vibrations to every corner of the planet. This leads us to the most underappreciated aspect of this crisis: the long-term generational shift. The leaders in Washington today were shaped by the Cold War victory and the era of American unipolarity. Their strategic mindset is one of dominance. But the younger generations across Latin America, and indeed much of the global South, have a different memory. They see the Iraq War, the financial crisis of 2008, the political polarization in the United States. They do not view American power as inherently benevolent or legitimate. This is not about being pro-Russian or pro-Chinese. It is about being post-American. They are pragmatic, seeking partners who can provide technology, investment, and security without the ideological baggage and conditionalities that often come with Washington. This is the fertile ground in which Russia and China are sowing their influence. They are not selling an ideology as compelling as democracy. They are offering a transaction. And for nations weary of lectures and pressure, a straightforward transaction can be incredibly appealing. This is why the diplomatic battle for the soul of the global South is being lost in the salons of Europe and Washington. and one on the ground in places like Venezuela, with infrastructure projects, arms sales, and economic lifelines. Furthermore, we must confront the role of non-state actors in this new great game. Powerful multinational corporations, global financial institutions, and even influential non-governmental organizations now operate as independent forces on this geopolitical chessboard. A corporation may decide that the potential profits in a Russia-allied Venezuela are worth the risk of defying American sanctions. A cryptocurrency network can facilitate financial flows that bypass state control entirely. The monopoly of the nation state over international relations is being challenged from above by great powers and from below by these agile non-state entities. So what is the end game? There are two broad, grim possibilities. The first is a new Cold War, but one that is more complex, more digital, and more volatile than the last. It would be a world divided into competing blocks with diminished trade, a splintering internet, and a permanent state of hybrid warfare in the gray zones between outright conflict and peace. It would be an era of heightened risk and lower global growth, where resources are diverted from solving planetary challenges like climate change to fueling a relentless arms race. The second, even darker possibility is that this managed competition fails, that an incident, a sunk ship, a downed aircraft, a cyber attack that cripples a power grid spirals out of control before the new guardrails can be built. In the absence of trust and clear communication channels, a local crisis could escalate to a global one with terrifying speed. The path forward, the narrow road between these two outcomes, requires a profound recalibration of American strategy. It necessitates moving from a posture of hegemony to one of competitive coexistence. It means accepting that the United States must compete vigorously and intelligently for influence, not assume it as a birthright. This competition will be won not just with aircraft carriers, but with better trade deals, more effective development aid, and a diplomatic corps that listens as much as it lectures. The warships in the Caribbean are a symptom, not the disease. The disease is the unresolved tension between a power in relative decline and rising powers demanding their place at the table. The cure is not to defeat Russia in Venezuela. It is to forge a new, more stable international order that can accommodate these shifting power dynamics without collapsing into war. We are present at the creation of this new order, and its shape is still being forged. The outcome depends on the wisdom, restraint, and strategic foresight of leaders in all capitals. The burden is on them to ensure that the birth pangs of this new era are not the death rattles of the old one. The world is holding its breath.